The wood for the body was pine, taken from an old bed rail, and put through the planer to achieve the correct thickness. The template for the center section was glued in place. Using the tape as an intermediary prevented glue residue on the wood. The two side sections were fixed together with double-sided tape and drilled, off-camera, 6.3mm diameter, before being cut out on the bandsaw. This produced two identical pieces. Once the body sections and the rear mudguard spacers were assembled, the holes would be re-drilled 7mm diameter. The axle hole in the center section was drilled, then re-drilled 9mm diameter to prevent any mismatch on assembly. The two side sections were separated. Then glued to the center section using the axle dowel rod to aid correct alignment. Next, one at a time, the mudguards were cut out on the bandsaw. The first operation on each mudguard was the underside. Then the undersides were sanded whilst still attached to the parent wood. This made them easier and safer to hold. And finally, the outside was cut out. The mudguard backplates were drilled, 7mm diameter. Then cut out on the bandsaw. The two pieces of each mudguard were glued together, then sanded on a disc. The seat was counterbored using a Forstner bit. Then the location hole was drilled 6mm diameter. The profile was cut out on the bandsaw. And finished by sanding on a disc. The final bandsaw operation was to cut out the front axle block. Which was then drilled 7 mm diameter. Discs for front and rear wheels were cut out using hole saws. Each of the rear wheels was made from 2 discs that were to be glued together. Drilling most of the way through, from one side and finishing from the other, made it easier to remove the discs from the cutter. The rear wheel discs were put together in pairs and mounted on a bolt, which became the mandrel for use on the lathe. The circumference of the discs was sanded and the edges rounded over. Relieving the face on one side creates the center boss and edge of the tire. The front wheels, which are only a single disc thick, are produced in the same way as the rear wheels, with one exception. The treads are cut on the lathe before the face is relieved. The rear wheel treads were cut on the bandsaw using an inclined graduated fixture. 12 slots were cut, 30 degrees apart, to a depth that was judged by eye. Once the 12 slots had been produced, each of them were widened by 2 more cuts with the blade. The discs were marked in pairs, with the discs being cut in opposite directions. Cutting the discs in opposite directions creates a converging pattern of treads when the wheel is assembled. The discs were glued together in pairs to create the rear wheels. The headlights were made from 8mm diameter dowel. Having been drilled to accept the mounting stalk, the headlights were turned on the lathe. The rear mudguard spacers were cut and glued into position off camera. The steering wheel was turned on the lathe. The steering column was to be a piece of a bamboo barbecue skewer. The seat location hole 6mm diameter and the steering column hole 2.5mm. The seat was glued in place using a piece of the 6mm diameter axle dowel as a location. The fuel tank was cut from an 8mm diameter dowel and glued in place. The rear mudguards were glued in position one at a time, followed by the front mudguards. The headlights were fitted using bamboo barbecue skewers for the stalks and column. Mineral oil was applied to the completed body, the wheels having been done previously. The wheels were fitted, the axles being 6mm diameter dowel rod.